big thanks to my listeners for staying tuned in to the Joan Jerkovich Show here on 910 KINA. We're here with our second guest, more big game hunters, and right here in the studio we're sitting with Lawrence Stoskoff and Ward Schrader. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So who's the biggest game hunter of the two?
Probably me.
Ward's going to take that honor, and I'm just fascinated with what you have both been telling me and talking about as we get set up here for our interview, and the pictures we're looking at on your iPod to show me some of these big game animals. Tell me about this most recent hunt you had. Why don't you start in?
Well, it was a stag stalking in Scotland. It's somewhat central to Scotland, in just north of Aberdeen, in the mountainous area. There's freshwater rivers with salmon runs and trout for fly fishing, and just absolutely a beautiful place to be.
Have you been there before?
I went about 4 years ago and came back, and Lawrence and I were visiting about it, and he said that he would like to go, and so I got him together with the people that organized the hunt, and he showed up this year, and I think he had a great time.
Well, now you two guys know that this is pretty elite hunting, and there's a lot of gentlemen out there, and maybe some ladies listening to this interview saying, darn, wish I had those kind of bucks to go, because it's a fairly expensive venture, isn't it?
Actually, one of the reasons I like it the most is for what you get to do, it's not exactly that expensive. An elk hunt in New Mexico, for example, might be $6,000 to $8,000. I think our hunt was $6,000,
and you were in
we
Scotland.
hunted for 5 days in Scotland, and we got to shoot as many animals as we could shoot and be able to carry out in 5 days.
So tell me how this works. Are you coming into some sort of a preserve, or I'm sure it's just like here you have to get licenses and such for the hunting? How
No.
does that work?
No, we don't need a license. It is not like here in the States. The herds of animals the land is all privately owned, and it's large estates. The one estate we hunted was approximately 80,000 acres. The story that I got was that it was gifted to one of Queen Victoria's daughters as a dowry, along with about a 50,000 square foot manor home on it.
Oh darn, yeah.
So
That's a
rough life.
true trust fund kid
Yeah.
there.
So we hunted that. The state, or their government, counts the stags on the estate every year, and then tells the estate how many animals they can harvest. The meat is very prized over there, and one of the beauties of Scotland to me is every little town has a fresh butcher shop, has a fresh bakery, and has a cheese shop and a wine shop, and all kinds of wonderful little locally provided foods. And so the meat is sold in the meat markets. We don't get to have any of the meat. It's mostly what's called a cull hunt. So we generally don't get the very biggest and the best of the animals. They're trying to weed out the weaker and the smaller animals so that the herd stays strong. On Glen Mar Estate, I think, which was 80,000 acres, there was 300 to 400 animals allowed to be taken and harvested. And very much like our cattle, they sell them for about $1.90 to $2 a pound, 1.5 euros, and it sells for about $16 to $20 a pound in the meat shops.
Wow, prime eating, I guess. And what does this have any relevance to what a lot of us have eaten here in the States, like venison?
It's an elk.
It is an elk,
They,
and we've had elk hunters here too, so
Mhm.
pretty
Just-
good tasting.
Oh, excellent.
Excellent. But you can't take any home. So you're there doing a cull hunt, like you said. You can't take any home to the United States back
No.
with you?
Well, I don't know exactly how we'd get it over here, but even if we could, but most of it is in the meat shop. We could buy some of it and bring it back with us.
But it has to basically be sent into the butcher shops there, and they then would sell it and that sort of thing. So Lawrence, jump in here. What did you want to say?
Actually, the cull is pretty important. People don't realize that they sell 70,000 carcasses a year to Europe, and it's one of their major exports that the local people really don't understand how economically valuable it is.
70,000, that's considerable.
That's considerable. And they try to get down to about one elk, male or female, per 25 acres. And 10 years ago, when they had the mad cow scare over there and couldn't export the deer, or the stags.
And this got into the stag herds as well,
Well,
the mad cow?
they were afraid it was, like there's a little fear about the mad cow here with deer here. They couldn't export it to Europe, and just having hunters come over didn't pay, and that got horribly overgrazed. They had way too many stags, and the estates really couldn't pay somebody just to go out and shoot them. Now,
Why couldn't they do that?
it costs money to have somebody to go out.
Okay, so they'd rather charge you guys money to come
Yeah.
have the sportsmanship of it versus pay someone.
And like Ward said, unlike here where everybody goes out and they hunt the biggest one with the biggest rack, over there, they wouldn't let us shoot those. They didn't even give us a chance because the idea was to kill the weak ones or the older ones. In fact, Bruce, one of the guys that went with us, shot one that had broken its jaw in a fight and was starving to death.
Mm.
And instead of taking a big one, they took the sick one that was going to die a painful death anyway. So it's really for the whole benefit of the herd to get it down to where they can survive the winter, and they want the biggest, meanest one to breed the next
Yeah,
year.
to
So
keep propagating the species out there in the herd. And I think that's really good you brought that up because, not everybody understands sportsmen and what they want to do. And certainly when we get into the bigger cities, they want to protect all these animals, but there's a reason to do this, to cull the herd. There's an economic factor as well.
The other thing that was around, and it's not grouse season when we were there, but grouse hunting is a big thing, and it's like shooting prairie chicken. And they get about $200 per pair. If you go out and shoot 2 prairie chicken, you pay them $200. So it is a major, major industry. And then in the summertime, they have the trout fishing, or the salmon trout fishing, which is very, very big.
Mm-hmm.
I ought to change subject just a minute here. You said the wives. Our wives went along and toured around, and Sunday they went to a small church, Crathy Church. Since we were only a few miles from where Queen Elizabeth stays in the fall, Joanne and Ward's wife Trish were in a church with about 150 people, which included the Queen, her husband Prince Charles, and Camilla.
Oh my goodness.
Set within about 150 feet, about 15 feet from them for the service. And I didn't realize that when the Queen's in England, she's Anglican, Episcopalian, but since the Church of Scotland is Presbyterian, when she crosses the border, she becomes a Presbyterian.
That's for real?
For real.
That's interesting.
Back to Ward here.
Well, did the ladies, your wives, have to practice their curtsies?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. There's very little security around the Queen.
Really?
A
That's
little
shocking.
bit when you enter the church. They're if you've got a bag, they look in the ladies' bags and so forth. But otherwise, you walk right in. There's no security between you and the Queen. And like Lauren said, I went 4 years ago with my wife to church, and they were there then also. They're there doing for about 2 months at their castle right by one of the estates that we hunt, and they're hunting also. All the boys. Prince Charles's sons and so forth are all there, and they're shooting stags and fishing. And
Have you happened to run into Prince William or either of the 2 princes?
well, 4 years ago they were at the church.
Oh, wow. You saw him at the church again.
Yeah.
This is going to make all these people want to find out who your outfitter is and sign up.
Well,
So let's get back to the hunting, the actual hunting, because I have a couple questions too. So, is it a little frustrating that you can't go after the big one, the big stag?
This is the most enjoyable hunt. I've hunted hunted and fished from Chile to Alaska, and I can't tell you of another more enjoyable hunt than this. And so no disappointment for me.
Yeah, the first morning, actually we went out Sunday morning in a 150-year-old firing range and sighted our weapons in. And Monday morning I went out with James, who was, you have to understand, the guide is a stalker. You hear of Highland game stalking. The
Are
stalker,
they actually called that?
that's what they're called, the stalker. And the man with the rifle is the shooter, and then they have a ghillie, which is the guy that takes care of all the details and drives whatever vehicle you have and helps with everything else. And James, that I had the first morning, is a 19-year-old fellow that went to college for 4 years, getting certified to be a stalker and learn about safety and all the different things.
So they're actually in a way licensed by the...
Yes, they're
Okay.
very carefully licensed. And we drove up this roaring little river way up into the hills, and there's nobody around, and off to about 2 miles to the left were 6 or 8 different stags bellowing at each other, bugling, I guess is the word. There were grouse there, ducks flying overhead, and James looked at me, put his hands in the air and says, "Welcome to my office."
Oh,
And it was a scene that you just can't imagine.
oh, and if you have any interest in this at all, I bet you just went green with envy. You turned the green of the countryside. And Ward is showing me right now a picture. What is this? It looks like a mock-up of a deer that has a hole in it. Is that how you sight your rifles, I'm guessing?
This is a, this actual device was made almost 100 years ago, they told me. And it's a steel plate about an inch thick. They cut a hole in it. It looks like a stag, and they put a target over it. And when you're sighting your rifles, as Lawrence was saying, you shoot through that. If you hit the hole, it doesn't make any noise from 100 yards. If you don't hit the hole, it rings like a bell.
Oh, that's fascinating. I think we're going to have to put that one up as well. Ward has already sent me some pictures that we have put up on the blog site. The ghillie, which is the packer, they call them, and also this. So just a lot of interesting pictures that you have from this. So when you're out there and you shoot the big animal, how big are they usually? Even if you've got the weaker ones, these are large animals. They're elk. Are they as big as the Colorado elk people here are more familiar with?
No, they're not. They measure them by stones. So they're 20 to 23 stones, which is about a 400-pound animal, 350 to 400 pound. So our elk get much bigger. They've told me that the government has shipped their stags from Scotland to the United States, and we've shipped our stags our elk from here to there, and within 3 generations, they're all the same size again. They don't. It's the food sources. They just don't have very good food source over there.
Which is again another reason to cull them. Now, when you actually do have your elk that you've shot out in the field, I assume you have to field dress them.
We field dress them, and then we get them onto a horse and hike however many miles out that we hiked in. So we start at generally you start at about 500 foot of altitude of sea level. You'll hike out in the mountains up to maybe 3,500 feet would be probably the highest. You'll find an animal. You'll discover a route that you can take to hide yourself because they have excellent vision, and the females are even if you're going after the males, the females are as alert as the males, and so they'll watch and scare off all the animals if you aren't very careful. So it's a hard hunt.
Well, I've heard that about sportsmen, and we're going to have to take a quick little break and come back to some more stories about the big game hunt with our big game hunters here. But you're listening to Joan with the Joan Jerkovich Show, and you need to for sure go to the video outtakes because I can't shut these guys up. I mean, they're just rattling on. You know how passionate these hunters can be. And the video outtakes, you can go to listen to the podcasts or link to iTunes. And also make sure you link to this blog about the big game hunting at joanjerkovich.com. We'll be right back on 910 KINA Saline. Went over about 20 seconds, but we can edit. Wow. You guys are just,
Joan, I'm kind of writing
you've got to
up.
have this rush.
I'm kind of writing up for this. Mike's never off.
Oh,
You're always on, you go from one rush to the next. It's like an adrenaline rush.
I'm writing a little thing for my kids about the hunt.